Good day and welcome to the 83rd episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. And today I'm going to spend some time to discuss the issue of how to decolonize a curriculum. But before I do that, let me go into the visit I had in London and the Iran US war. So I was in, let me start with the Iran US wars first. So initially, a few weeks ago, it seemed as if war between Iran, the US, and Israel, and primarily the US, was inevitable. And then we see reality is kicking in, as we often say in previous videos. We are in this phase of the decline of Western Empire, and the erratic policy moves that the Trump administration is making makes you wonder where we are going. But we see that this threat of war, in order to make it real, to make it practical, the specialists of the US Defense Forces, the US War Forces, the specialists are coming in now, and they are telling Trump and all these people, you're crazy. And they get a message, and now Marco Rubio gave an interesting interview. He says any military action at this point in the Middle East, whether it's against Iran, by us, or anybody else, could in fact trigger a much broader conflict. So this idea that you bomb Iran, some nuclear facility, and everything is okay, they realized, no, that's not the case. And Rubio says any military action at this point in, any source of armed conflict in the region is going to be much messier than what people are used to seeing. And that's why the president is so committed to the peaceful resolution, the prevention of an armed conflict. Although he reserves every right to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, he is for peace. Guess what? A few weeks ago, it's all about if you don't submit, if you don't do what we do, we're going to bomb you. And now the thing is, this could become much messier, and we want rather peace than armed conflict. And then he says, we recognize it's difficult and hard. Sometimes, unfortunately, peace is, but we are committed to achieving a peaceful outcome that's acceptable to everyone. Acceptable to every means acceptable to the Iranians. It's a different tone than we are going to impose on you something that you can't accept, and if you don't accept it, we will bomb you. Different tone. Why? Tucker Carlson is one of the right-wing pro-Trump supporters, but a realist, and he spoke to people in the Pentagon, and he says a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities would almost certainly result in thousands of American deaths at bases throughout the Middle East, and cost the US states billions of dollars. Those aren't guesses. Those are the Pentagon own estimates. A bombing campaign against Iran will set off a war, and it will be America's war. Reality is kicking in these guys. So the Pentagon is telling the administration, don't do it, because once this starts, it's out of control. We have 10 military bases. We have a warship with 5,000 personnel. The Iranian, within 24 hours, will flatten all these bases, will sink the US carrier with the 5,000 people in it and bomb it to the bottom of the sea. And if that's the result, you better get peace that is acceptable to everyone, including Iran. So this is a game changer. If they get to an agreement, we have to see, and we have to see whether the hardliners in Israel and in the United States can pressure the Trump administration, but even the hardliners like Rubio are seeing, oh, we need to tone down our thing that either you accept or we bomb you, because the Iranians said, come and bomb us and let's see where we go. And then the Pentagon comes in and says, no man, this is suicide. So the genocide is going on in Gaza, but this will have impact sooner or later on Palestine on a large scale. So let me go back to my visit in London. I had a visit with the DIN board. We had a long conversation. The Islamic Human Rights Commission in London is facilitating all this. It's a wonderful organization without which DIN would not have existed. And Ramon Grossvogel, a dear friend and brother, who is the president of DIN. I'm the secretary. Masoud Chalareh is a member of the board. And we were invited in Essex by a group about which I will talk in more depth. We had the pleasure of listening to Professor David Miller and Professor Haim Brashid Sapner. We were in a panel discussing the question of restoring integrity in education, challenging narrative through a decolonial lens, and empowering educators. And it was presided by a dear friend, Rasa Kassam, who is a very experienced teacher in mathematics, knows the educational system in the UK in and out, and he moderated the discussion. Now, what is interesting is this. The group that organized this thing is an amazing group. They invited me last year to give a course on decolonizing the mind, which I do regular across the world. And it was a group led by the sisters, Fatima and Shahida Dosa. And it was a day-long decolonizing the mind workshop. And after the workshop, they set up a WhatsApp group. They call it also and then colonize the mind. For now, they have 64 members in that WhatsApp group. And these are young Muslim women, very religious, very dedicated, very anti-decolonial, very anti-imperialist, enormously inspiring group. And they have been working after the workshop I gave. They continued workshops with other people, and they were educators, teachers in primary, secondary, and higher education that they work with. And they set up a project, and I'm going to discuss this project because it's a fascinating project. It's called Decolonizing the Curriculum. And I have a PDF of the flyer, which I'm going to discuss. And in the coming weeks and months, I'm going to have more in-depth discussions with them on this issue of decolonizing the curriculum. And I hope we can share the discussion and experience internationally. But they have already done a lot of preparatory work. So this they produce these fact sheets for educators. And one of the things that Rasa Kasim said at the panel discussion was, look, if you look at the formal policy, the education policy of the government, the educational institutions, they promote critical thinking. They said, we should promote critical thinking. But what is critical thinking? And this is the thing, you bring in critical thinking as decolonizing the curriculum. And that is what they put head on. And because there are teachers in it, so this is not something that's being done from the university, it's not something that's being done by some institution. These are just activists Muslim activists, also secular, also other people are in it, but led by these amazing women. And the fact sheet so begins with defining what is decolonizing the curriculum. And they said it's an ongoing process of critically examining and reshaping education to remove colonial bias, acknowledge diverse acknowledge diverse knowledge system, and ensure more inclusive perspective. It challenges Eurocentric narratives and promotes a curriculum that reflects global history, cultures, and contributions, which is a very up to date and very good definition in just one sentence what decolonizing curriculum is. I couldn't have put it better, and this is a definition that everybody can use. And then they come up with key concepts and definition. They define colonialism as a historical process of European powers controlling and exploiting lands, people, resources, often erasing local knowledge and culture. So, in all the work I'm doing, I emphasize that there's another dimension than the process of controlling and exploiting lands, and they relate to it. That's the concept of civilization, that colonialism has created a new kind of civilization. And a civilization is a collection of society based on a certain knowledge production. So, and that is linked to the European Enlightenment. But anyway, these are the kind of discussions we're going to have in the future and share it also with our audience. They define settler colonialism as a form of colonialism where settlers permanently displace indigenous population, like in Palestine, Americas, Australia. They define Eurocentrism, the assumption that European ideas, values, and histories are superior and universal, shaping what is taught in schools and universities, which is a very good definition of Eurocentrism. They define epistemic injustice as the suppression or devaluation of non-Western knowledge system and perspectives in education and academia. And they take whitewashing as a key concept, the erasure of minimization of non-European perspective in education, reinforcing a white Eurocentric view of history and knowledge. And then Orientalism, a concept that Edward Said described of how the West historical misrepresented and stereotyped Eastern societies, shaping colonial narratives in education, media, and politics. And we can go into other key concepts like the colonization of the mind and what it means to decolonize the mind. And then they go into a brief history of decolonizing curriculum. So, these activists, these, people so inspiring, they put their work in a global context. They don't say, oh, look, what we are doing here in the UK is what we should focus on. They say, no, the movement to decolonize education has roots in the anti-colonial struggle worldwide, across Africa, Asia, and South and Central America. Post-independence governments sought to reclaim indigenous and local knowledge from the colonial education system. The 1970s and 60s saw students and scholars in the UK, the US, and beyond pushing for curriculum reform to include African, indigenous, and global perspective. And in the last decades, campaigns such as Why is My Curriculum White and Road Must Fall have reignited discussions on how colonial legacy continue to shape education. And in Palestine, as in many other colonized spaces, education has been a key of resistance, with communities fighting for the right to teach and learn their own history. In just, a few sentences, they managed to capture the positioning of their work into a global history. And then they go into the question, why does this matter in education? They said history is incomplete. So they focus on history. Our work goes broader than just history. It goes even into mathematics. And then they say many curriculums still downplay colonial history, resistance movements, and the contribution of non-Western societies. Colonial production is unequal. Western scholars are often prioritized over those from the colonized and marginalized communities. education at resistance in Palestine and other colonized regions. The right to an education that reflects lived reality is an act of defiance against erasure. Creating inclusive spaces for students, decolonizing the curricula creates inclusive spaces for marginalized and minoritized students, validating their histories, experience, and contributions, creating a sense of belonging and empowerment through education. This means providing an education in which individuals experience identity safety, defined as a situation in which all students are valued, included, and can perform to their highest potential. You know, this question of safe spaces is an important discussion. In Holland, a group called RLS put safe spaces together with another concept called brave spaces, which are spaces where you engage in confrontation and intellectual confrontation. And then you are prepared in the safe spaces to go into the brave spaces, to be able to go into discussions with Eurocentric thinkers. Better learning opportunities for students, including new and challenging perspectives within curricula, both enriches learning and enhances critical thinking. And then they go into the question, what can decolonizing curriculum look like? So they are very practical. They are theoretically very sound, and they go into the practicalities of things. And that is what decolonizing the Mount is about. They say, while specific strategies as an example will be explored in the sessions, the actions below, among others, offer insight into how decolonizing curriculum can take shape in your classroom and lecture theaters. Teaching colonial history critically, highlighting anti-colonial struggles, including Palestinian resistance and global solidarity movement, diversifying reading lists to include South Central American, Palestinian, African, indigenous, and other marginalized voices, teaching about contemporary struggles for decolonization, including in Palestine through geography, history, literature, and politics, encouraging students to question dominant narratives, engage with different perspectives, create a safe space and supporting environment where teachers and educators can openly reflect on their positionality, privilege, and biases with confidence and curiosity, re-examining academic syllabi to include scholars from the global majority. They use the term global majority, which is interesting as a concept. So it's not only talking about the global south, but the global majority, meaning the global south, that is obviously in the majority. Critiquing Eurocentric knowledge production and research in academia, ensuring an institution's policies reflect decolonial commitment, including partnership with scholars and institutions in the global majority, recognizing and resisting the complicity of educational institutions in ongoing colonial structures, including in Palestine. And they as a practical group, they say, okay, where can we start? Say self-reflection, examine biases in your own teaching materials and methods, curriculum audit, identify gaps where colonial perspectives dominate the curricula and seek diverse sources, collaborate with communities, engage with marginalized and minoritized communities, including your students, to understand their living experience, challenge institutional barriers, push for systemic change in education institutions to center decolonial perspective, encourage critical pedagogy, support student activism, encourage questioning of dominant narratives. And then they give a list of resources, things you could read, a bibliography, and the fact sheet. The group is called Chelmsford Action for Palestine, and they have Instagram, TikTok. They work together with the Sabah Collective. This is the email there you see in the PowerPoint, including the links to the Instagram and TikTok. I will be having discussions with this group in the future, and I would like to invite them to do the discussions also in our podcast, share their knowledge, experience, insights. I'll put a link on my website at this video where you can download the flyer. Very interesting development, very inspiring development. And I never thought that when I gave a course on decolonizing the mind, this might have been the result. So this is a big inspiration for me in doing and continuing the work. So this is the end of the video. If you want to support the channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe and get involved in groups like this. These activists in the UK. So we'll be talking to you next week, hopefully.